Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having an amazing Tuesday. I am your All Sports Alpha, Leonardo Velasquez, and today we are going to be diving into the NFL playoffs along with making our predictions. And also, we will be making our prediction for the National Championship on Monday, and it will be a fantastic game between Indiana and Miami. But to start things off, we will kick things with the NFL, starting off with our reactions from the games this past weekend. An amazing weekend occurred in the NFL. I think most of these games, they were very entertaining. Obviously the last two Sunday night between New England and the Chargers, it was a very close battle. Same thing with the game yesterday on Monday night with the Houston Texans and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Very close battle up until the fourth quarter, and then the Texans started pulling away with that amazing defense that they have been displaying all season. And all the other games, that amazing comeback from the Chicago Bears, another comeback against Green Bay. I think we got a new rivalry on us now with those two teams. An amazing performance by San Francisco by staying in the game and not really letting Philadelphia pull away with the lead. And then the Carolina Panthers, they almost pulled off the massive upset. It was a shootout until the very end. Very entertaining way to start off the NFL playoffs. And this next round, expect some fireworks. Same with the Bills and the Jaguars. Great game as well. Came down to the wire. Very similar game compared to the Panthers and Rams. Overall, a lot of good games occurred this weekend, and I'm very excited to talk about it with you guys. So also, we will be giving our reactions to the semifinals of the college football playoffs as well. So those are things we're going to be looking forward to. So to start things off, now with the LA Rams, they advanced to the next round, and now they're going to be facing the Chicago Bears in Chicago. And I believe that the Rams, they got a little bit lucky, but as I've been saying, their defense is what really made the game difficult for them against Carolina. Carolina, they did try to take advantage of that home field, but in the end, the Rams just prevailed. They had that good throw by Matthew Stafford to get the touchdown with nearly 30 seconds left in the game. Made it practically extremely difficult for the Panthers to find a way to tie the game or even win it with a touchdown. So they really put that game on ice for the Panthers. And then with the 49ers and the Eagles, it just seemed like the Eagles offense really struggled to get going in the game, and a lot of drop passes, most notably by AJ Brown, and also like the running game wasn't established very well. And then as the game progressed, it seemed like the 49ers figured out how to really attack Philadelphia's defense, and next thing you know, they pulled away and found a way to really seal the win. And then I don't have to say much about the Chicago Bears and the Packers. It was an amazing game. I really thought for a while that the Packers had it, because it just seemed like the offense for Chicago, for the Bears, they didn't, they couldn't get into a rhythm. Next thing they chip away at the lead with a few field goals, and next thing you know, they start scoring in the fourth quarter, and they were able to pull off that miraculous comeback. It was something special, not to see again. It's one thing to do it one time against one team, but to do it again against that same team, it's mind blowing. It was something special to watch, and looking forward to that match against the Rams. And then also with the Bills and the Jaguars, as I said at the beginning of this video, very similar match with the Rams and the Panthers. It was a shootout. It was close to the very end. It really came down to one last possession. And I think, when it comes down to the Bills and the Rams, they are like almost equals of each other. I consider the Bills to be the Rams version in the AFC. Both very good offenses, but they lack a little bit on defense. And then with the Patriots and the Chargers, it was, very, very chess match like game style. It was very slow pace, very physical, very defensive. And then New England was able to pull away with the win in the end by scoring a touchdown. Drake May connected with Hunter Henry in the end zone. Very clutch play from Drake May. He stayed very composed. And also, I was very impressed with his ability to scramble and pick up those extra yards. He had a very good play in the game where he rushed for, I don't know exactly how much it was, but it was definitely a gain more of like he gained more than 25 yards on that run that he had. Very impressive, very impressive performance from Drake May to stay composed, especially with that, defense of the Chargers attacking him all night. He got sacked a few times, and he stayed composed in the pocket. He found ways to just, pick away from the defense, and eventually he found that opening and was able to connect with Hunter Henry in the end zone to seal the victory for the Patriots. And then yesterday, I think we saw what we all expected, that powerful defense from the Texans just dismantled the Steelers on offense. Aaron Rodgers couldn't get going with his receivers, and especially with the defensive line just constantly putting on pressure on Aaron Rodgers. You didn't think that it was going to be an easy night for the Steelers, but to see what unfolded, that defense really stepped up, and it's going to be a definitely an interesting matchup with New England, considering that these two haven't faced each other this season. So maybe we'll talk about that game more as it goes on, as the video progresses. And then to reflect on the college football semifinals, Miami and Ole Miss, it was a great game. I did say in my prediction in the last video when I talked about these games that I believe that the game would be very close up until like the end of the third, beginning of the fourth quarter, and then Miami would pull away. But this game was very close until the very end. Miami, they took advantage of that last possession that they had. Carson Beck was able to find that gap in the field and run into the end zone to seal the victory, and made it extremely difficult for Ole Miss to get one last shot at scoring some points on the board to keep the game going in their favor. And then with Indiana and Oregon, they just Indiana is just a complete football team on both sides of the ball. On offense, they know how to utilize the passing and run game. Defensively, they know how to put the pressure on their opponents. And it was just I think they wanted to go in there and make a statement and send a message to Miami saying that no, this is how we roll, and we're gonna go all out on you guys. But Miami's defense is up for the challenge. It's going to be a very exciting matchup. We will make our predictions towards the end of the video for that specific game. But now that we're done reflecting on all those first round matchups for the NFL playoffs and the semifinals for the college football playoffs, we are now going to be making our predictions for the divisional round for both NFC and AFC. We will start off with the NFC side, and then we will transition to the AFC. So for the NFC matchup, we have the San Francisco 49ers going up against Seattle Seahawks, again in Seattle. And this will be a very, very interesting matchup, like the last one at the end of the season that decided who was going to be the number one seed. And I think this match will definitely come down to who can just, be more efficient on offense, because I think that's how the first game went. But I think I will give the edge to the Seahawks just because they have a better defense, and I think they found a way to really stop their opponents in crucial moments of the game. I know that game against the Rams, they let the Rams really run up the score on them, but then when time really mattered, they shut them down, and then they gave Sam Darnold and the offense to come back onto the field and give them chances to put points on the board to keep the game going, and then they found a way to win that game. It was a fabulous game, one of the best games of the season. It was a shootout, and I think with that experience, that big tough game experience, I think that helps Sam Darnold, considering that I think one of the things that I've been saying about him for a long time is I think he needs some big game experience under his belt. That game with the Rams was a big game. It was a good win for them to really keep themselves in pace for that number one seed, and then in a very, very good win against San Francisco by holding them to just 3 points. So I think I will pick the no, excuse me. I will pick the Seattle Seahawks to beat the San Francisco 49ers in this one. I just think they have a better all-around team. I think, especially with that home field advantage, and yeah, that defense will definitely make the difference. The one thing I will say is we'll see how the teams that got that first round bye. So in the first round bye, you had Denver getting the first round bye for the AFC, and obviously Seattle got the first round bye for the NFC. So we'll see if there's any rust. I like to think that there won't be, but we'll see what happens. Anything can happen now at this point in the season. It is the playoffs. Sometimes experience can overcome talent. We've seen that many times, because in the past there's been many teams that ended up winning the Super Bowl that people thought that they weren't the best team, and next thing you know, they would find a way to win the big games in the past. So we'll see. I mean, with the San Francisco 49ers, Brock Purdy, he's been in a Super Bowl before. He probably knows now how to handle that magnitude of a big game and handling the pressure. So we'll see if he can keep the game close and give 49ers a chance. But I have the Seattle Seahawks taking the win and advancing to the NFC Championship. And now for the next NFC divisional match, we have the LA Rams going up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago. And I think this will be a very fun matchup, considering that I think both of these offenses have shown their ability to run up the score. And obviously, I think with the Bears' ability to keep games close and also with that home field advantage, I'm gonna lean towards the Bears. I do believe that the Rams got a little bit lucky against the Carolina Panthers just because they, you know, had that last possession. And I think if there was any less time on the field, like let's say there was like a minute 40 seconds left on the clock, it would have been difficult for the Rams to get that game winning touchdown. But enough with the hypotheticals. We just got to go by what happened. Still, the Matthew Stafford, he's found a way to keep this team pushing forward, and I expect the Rams to be able to score a lot of points because we have seen at moments where the Chicago Bears defense is vulnerable, but it seems like they get off to a slow start in a lot of games, and I don't think you can do that against the Rams. But I think now with that comeback against Green Bay, I think they will have that, more of like that mental urgency to try their best on offense to keep on defense to keep the Rams from running up the score on them because you can only make comebacks so many times in the NFL. And I think at this point in the season, you want to play more complete football by making sure you're keeping the game close, giving the offense opportunities to take the lead. And I think that's what it's gonna come down to. So I think it's gonna if it's a close game, I think the Bears win in the end. Maybe it's close until like the fourth quarter, like how we've been seeing for all these other games. But I think if the Rams run up the score early and then the Chicago Bears take a little bit to get settled into the game, I think that might backfire on them. So it can go those two ways. But I still have Chicago winning. I like their resilience this season. I like the way they've been handling the pressure. And I think now having that come back under their belt and continuously now they're going to be playing again in front of their home crowd. I like their chances of beating the Rams. So give me the Chicago Bears to advance to the NFC Championship to face the Seattle Seahawks. That is the NFC side, and now we will transition to the AFC side. So for the first AFC matchup we have here on our board, we have the Buffalo Bills going up against the number one seed Denver Broncos in Denver. I think this will be a fun matchup. I think it will be a close game considering that Denver does have a good defense. And also, I think a lot of people don't like to talk about Denver in terms of the altitude that there is in Colorado. I think there's a lot of teams that when they go there, they might get a little bit tired. And there's so many like moments and experiences, I think, from athletes like for example boxers, they do like to train in Colorado because they know there's higher elevation. It can help them with their oxygen, with their endurance in the ring. And I think with Denver, having that time off, we'll see if they're still in that game shape because sometimes when you take a week off and especially going up against a high powered offense like the Buffalo Bills, we may not know what team we're going to see. Are we going to see an efficient defense, a team that keeps the game close against a high powered offense like Buffalo, or are we going to see a team that, because of that 1 week off, they're going to take a little bit to get settled into the game and Buffalo is going to take advantage of that and score early and take an early lead. So, I think if I'm gonna go with my honest opinion, I'm gonna go with the Buffalo Bills to win this. I was very impressed with Buffalo's way to stay in the game against Jacksonville. I did have Jacksonville being one of the leading contenders to go to the Super Bowl, but obviously sometimes experience can be better than overall talent of another team. So I think that Josh Allen and the Bills are gonna find a way to, utilize their offense and to just put themselves in a winning position against this Denver team. And I think towards the end of the season, there were moments where we saw a little bit of cracks on the team with the Denver Broncos. I mean, I think the most surprising loss for them, in my opinion, I think for a lot of people, was when Jacksonville went up there and beat them. So I think when you're constantly putting on the pressure offensively and I think a game plan that the Bills are going to want to utilize is really take their time on offense, keep Bo Nix in the offense off the field, and really just take their time by moving the chains. Don't rush the plays, run time off the clock if they really want to take some rhythm away from the Broncos because Broncos I think they thrive in really close games and close scenarios. So I think in this case they want to try to find a way to keep the offense off the field while also scoring points and taking the lead early. So I think the experience for Josh Allen in the playoffs will definitely help him here. And I just think Bo Nix, still a young quarterback, is still a young team, but they had a great year, but I think it ends this weekend against Buffalo. So give me the Buffalo Bills to beat the Denver Broncos and to advance to the AFC Championship. And then for our last game of the weekend, which won't be the last game of the weekend, but the last game we have here on our board, we have the Houston Texans going up against the New England Patriots. Now, this game, in my opinion, is the most difficult to predict out of all of them. I think we know why, because I think when it comes down to how these two teams played in the last few days, by looking at New England, it just seemed like the offensive line really struggled at times to protect Drake May. He did get sacked a few times, and that's something you don't want to do against this Houston defense. This Houston defense are a pack of wolves. They will come at you with everything they have throughout the whole game. And also, their safeties are extremely, extremely talented. They don't give enough space to the receivers to get wide open and get those easy looks. So that's something that New England is going to need to really look on and to adjust throughout the game, because I think this defense it's going to be a defense that they haven't seen all season. It's considering that also this is the first time that they will be playing each other this season. But looking at the Houston Texans, it also seems like they struggled offensively, and I don't want the score to misguide people like how it was a blowout against Pittsburgh. I would say that the reason why it was a blowout was just because of the defense. I will say New England will have a strong chance to win this game if the offense for Houston is not in a good rhythm like we saw in in Pittsburgh, because to be fair, New England does have a better offense than Pittsburgh. But the question is, will New England's offense be able to handle the Houston defense? So now, if we look at these two variables, New England does have a good defense too, so we can't discourage that. They put on an amazing defensive performance against the Chargers. It was really, really impressive to see how they really just bought time and really kept the game close, never let it pull away from them. And I think in this case, it's a 50-50 matchup for me. I think it's a coin flip. Both teams, I think, relied a lot on their defense, and but I think New England does have a better defense than Pittsburgh. But the one question mark that I have here, the one worrisome that I would put for the New England Patriots, can they make Drake May have enough time to release the ball, but also can the receivers get open to the point where he's not having to get worried about getting sacked? If there's an alternative to that game plan, instead of passing the ball, they got to find a way to utilize that run game. But the Houston defense is good all around. So that's the question. Will the offense be able to handle Houston's defense? And this is a tough matchup to predict. I mean, it's very tough. And I think I'm going to have to go with the Houston Texans to get this one done. I think going into an environment like Pittsburgh, going on the road, and I think some good road wins this season under their belt, I think that will give them the slight edge. I know people say that New England does have the home field advantage, but I think defense in the playoffs makes a huge difference. It really does, because there's been so many moments where we have seen teams in the past, like 15, 20 years, where they rely a lot on their defense and they end up becoming Super Bowl champions. We can name a few. We can name the Eagles last season. We can name the Chiefs, how they won against the 49ers in overtime. That was a very close game, but that season they really relied on their defense. The Denver Broncos, back when they won Super Bowl 50 in Peyton Manning's final game, Von Miller and that defense was pressuring Cam Newton all game. I can think of New England in 2005, that amazing defense. You had amazing players like Teddy Bruschi, Richard Seymour, Rodney Harrison, Mike Vrabel, Asante Samuel. A lot of great defensive players on that team. And against a good offense like the Eagles back in 2005, you had Donovan McNabb. Obviously, Terrell Owens was injured in the Super Bowl, but still, it was a great offense. But, there's sometimes we got to say that defense can make a team thrive in the playoffs. And that's the main reason why I'm going with this Houston Texans team to beat New England, especially, having an impressive win in Kansas City. That's a tough environment to win in. Pittsburgh is also a tough environment to win in as well. We saw how close that game was with the Ravens and the Steelers, and then the Steelers were able to probably use that to their advantage. But still, I think Texans they have found a way to get this win streak, going. 10 straight wins for them. And one thing I always say to myself is whenever a team is on a win streak, I never pick against them until they lose. So up until, let's say, they win and advance to the AFC Championship, I'll probably pick them to win the AFC Championship if I'm being honest with you. So those are my predictions. Now to just recap them, we have the Seahawks beating the 49ers, and we have the Bears beating the Rams, both teams advancing to the NFC Championship. And then we have Buffalo beating Denver, and then we have the Houston Texans beating the Patriots. Those are our predictions for the next round of the NFL playoffs, and they're going to be amazing games. I'm so excited for them. Just a few days away, coming up this weekend. And now to the last part of the video, we're going to be talking about the National Championship for college football. Now, this is a game I think that's going to be filled with a lot of fireworks. Both deserving teams, they both deserve to be in this position. Indiana undefeated, Heisman winner Fernando Mendoza. He's had an amazing year, found a way to lead this team. Their coach Signetti, he's just, found a way to make this team into a powerhouse. And Miami, I think, Miami has shown so much resilience in the playoffs. I think when it comes down to the experience, I don't know. I think with these tough wins under their belt, Texas A&M, then you have Ohio State, and then you have Ole Miss, and now Indiana. Carson Beck, I think he has some experience facing some tough teams, so that can help Miami on offense. And obviously, we don't have to talk about, the defense of Miami. Their defense is, relentless. But I will say, in the game against Ole Miss, it was the first time we really saw the defense allowing a lot of points. But I would say that Indiana does have a great offense, and they know how to run the ball, make the game physical. But Fernando Mendoza, he knows how to utilize his passing game and find open receivers, and their offense is just really dominant, as we've seen in these last two games against Oregon and Alabama. Oregon, they had a great defense, but I think their offense just never got established in the game. But also their defense just went up against that superpower offense. And then when I look at Miami, I think, that game against Ole Miss definitely came down to the wire, and not to forget to mention, but also Miami is going to have home field advantage, as this game will be being played in Miami. So that's another factor to consider. But we know that those Indiana fans, they've been showing out for a lot of these games. So we can expect mostly a 50-50 crowd for both teams. But if I have to look at which team is going to win this, I'm just going to go with Indiana. They're undefeated for a reason. They're a complete team. Amazing on offense. They're amazing on defense. And I think, if it was Indiana against Ole Miss, I do believe that Indiana would have had a better performance than Miami did. Miami, it came down to the wire, and Carson Beck found the end zone in the end to get the win. But, I think Miami's defense will keep the game close, maybe in the first half, and then maybe, in the second half, that's when Indiana can pull away. But I won't be surprised if this game maybe stays close until the end, and then it really will depend on maybe who has the ball in the final possession with 2 minutes left in the game. It could possibly come down to that. But I just think Indiana, perfect season. And we'll just see if they're going to be able to handle the pressure too, because, sometimes undefeated teams, they may crumble under pressure. So that's something to look forward to. But I have Indiana winning. I think it'll be a great game, a close game for majority, and then Indiana will pull away. So as I think, no matter what happens, I think Indiana will find a way to win the game. But that is it for today's football recap and predictions for the next round. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow we will be releasing videos on the NBA and college basketball, mainly because there's a story that recently broke out about Jaylen Brown, who just got fined $35,000 for criticizing the referees in the recent game between the Celtics and the Spurs. And also we will dive into the college basketball season and how it's been transpiring, and some notable teams that we can look at who can maybe be the national champions when March Madness arrives. But overall, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't yet, please like, subscribe, take it easy, and we'll see you on the next one.